If you ever imagined how Bigfoot would look like, your brain surely jumps to the Wookiee. This hairy alien species hails from the forest-covered planet of Kashyyyk, and they're best known for their ability to rip people's arms off. Add to that Wookiees stand over 2 meters tall, but while they're known for their towering size and incredible strength, they're also built for climbing trees, using their long limbs and retractable claws to allow them to do that rather efficiently. They also have long lifespans that allow them to live for centuries at a time. Wookiees may sound primitive because of their deep growls and roars, but this is actually a complex language called Shiriwook, which is almost impossible for humans to say unless they've swallowed a Wookiee hairball. But while humans struggle to speak Shiriwook, a lot of them did actually understand the Wookiee language. Even though Wookiees don't look like it, they are indeed very intelligent. They're gifted engineers and mechanics. That's why Chewbacca is more skilled at fixing the Millennium Falcon than Han Solo himself. Culturally, they are deep-rooted in honor and loyalty, often willing to stick by the side of a person who saved their life because of their life debt tradition. They also value family traditions above everything, having their own rituals and coming-to-age rituals for young Wookiees, where they have to venture into the Shadowlands and survive. That's why, despite being smart and technologically advanced, they live harmoniously with nature, preferring to live in treehouse cities instead of skyscrapers. Also, Wookiees that went against the culture and resorted to violence were usually banished and branded a Mad Claw. Also a side note, Wookiees are known to shed their fur seasonally, which isn't the greatest thing if you happen to be roommates with one, because it's like living with an overgrown dog that requires a really powerful vacuum. Lasats are basically Wookiees if you strip them of their fur. Might be because they're based on early concept art for Chewbacca. They have large muscular builds, digitigrade legs, and powerful frames that allow them to look like the scariest bouncers in a bar on Coruscant. Meanwhile, their bodies are also covered in short-cut fur, usually a mix of purple, grays, and whites. And to complete the look, they have strong facial features and long ears that make them look like a combination of a gorilla, a mountain goat, and a wrestler. And wrestlers they are, as they have enough brute strength to knock down an entire company of stormtroopers. But under all that muscle, there's a deeply spiritual culture. The Lasats follow the teachings of the Ashla, a mystical energy that resembles the Force but leans heavily into the ideas of balance and destiny. Many of them believe in prophecy and a spiritual homeland called Lira San, which is said to be their original homeworld before they moved to Lasan. So, after the Empire nearly destroyed their current homeworld of Lasan by using ion disruptors on civilians, the few surviving Lasats held on to their beliefs, allowing them to finally find this ancient homeworld. A specialty for Lasats were their bow rifles, which were electrocharged melee blaster combo weapons. Only the Honor Guard of Lasan were said to be allowed to wield these sacred weapons. The most well-known Lasat in the galaxy is Garazeb Aurelios, a former captain of the Lasan Honor Guard before the Empire attacked their planet. For the longest time, he thought he was the only surviving Lasat in the galaxy. He became a member of the Ghost Crew and later joined the Rebel Alliance, even serving after the Battle of Endor. He'll likely appear more in Ahsoka Season 2 or the Mando movie that are coming up. Cal Kestis' master, called Jero Tapal, was also a Lasat, and died heroically defending Cal. Naboo isn't home to just one sentient species. While the humans live in lush and thriving cities on the surface, the waters are home to the Gungans. These are amphibious alien species living in underwater cities. Due to their amphibious nature, Gungans have long limbs, floppy ears, and eye stalks on top of their heads. Their faces are also rubbery and flexible, giving them the ability to look goofy and fearsome, whichever way you may look at them. Meanwhile, their skin tones vary from earthy colors to brighter hues of red or orange, sprinkled with patterns that usually belong to frogs and fish. What makes Gungans special among most species is their ability to live normal lives on both the surface and in the water. They usually spend most of their time in their underwater cities thanks to their internal nostril flaps, but they're also perfectly adapted to life on the surface. Their long and powerful legs are suited for both underwater swimming and running on surfaces. Gungan culture is hierarchical, with a council of representatives handling their internal affairs. Sitting on top of this hierarchy is the boss, the political leaders of the Gungans. After the Battle of Naboo, the Gungans were allowed a seat in the Galactic Senate, with a representative handling the galactic affairs of these people alongside the human representative of Naboo. While Gungans may act and talk primitively, they are skilled engineers. For weaponry, though, they used energy-based weapons like the boomas and atlatls, which they had to throw by hand. They are also capable of crafting powerful energy shields capable of withstanding bombardment from Trade Federation AATs and MTTs. Their ingenuity can also be seen in their underwater city designs, which are all covered by a shield to keep the water out. Unlike most species in the galaxy who believe in the Force, the Gungans believe in something called the life current. This is often interpreted as their way of understanding the Force in nature, and their isolation from mainstream society for millennia may have allowed them to adopt their own version of the Force. The most infamous Gungan in the galaxy is undoubtedly General Tarpal, who went 1 versus 1 with Grievous and friggin' won. Okay, we won't let that count. They did my boy Grievous dirty there. Another infamous Gungan is, of course, Jar Jar Binks. He eventually became the Gungan representative to the Galactic Republic and was manipulated into passing a motion granting then-Chancellor Sheev Palpatine the emergency powers he used to create a grand army for the Republic and to reconstruct the Galactic Republic into the Galactic Empire. But it was all part of his plan because, in truth, the true Sith Lord was him, Darth Jar Jar, who manipulated the events in the galaxy with his buffoonery to take control of the Empire. Long may Darth Jar Jar live! The Twi'leks come from the dry and rocky planet of Ryloth. They had a humanoid appearance, but stood out due to their fleshy head tail called Laku. These were not just for show, as the Laku were actually part of a Twi'leks brain structure, often used for communication between them. Interestingly, when a Twi'leks Laku is damaged, it can impair the brain function. Meanwhile, their skin can come in a wide range of colors, including green, blue, and red. And because of their smooth skin and beautiful colors, female Twi'leks are often considered exotic and very pretty people by other species, which is why there's a good chance you'd see one dancing in a shady Tatooine cantina. Males also usually had bigger, more defined foreheads than females, which tended to look very natural, just like humans. Culturally, the Twi'lek society is clan-based, and many still follow ancient customs tied to family loyalty and honor. Leadership on Ryloth is handled by a system of clan leaders and a governing body called the Clan Council. But because of economic problems plaguing Ryloth, some Twi'leks don't hesitate to sell their own kind into slavery. There are plenty of notable Twi'leks in the galaxy. One such is Aayla Secura, a blue-skinned Twi'lek who fought as a Jedi general during the Clone Wars and had a, let's say, special relationship with Clone Commander Bly. Another heroic Twi'lek is Hera Syndulla, the daughter of a Ryloth freedom fighter named Cham Syndulla. Hera played a vital role during the rebellion as a member of the Ghost Crew, eventually becoming one of the top military leaders of the New Republic because of her legendary piloting skills. It is interesting to note that Twi'leks and humans are biologically compatible, with Hera Syndulla bearing a hybrid child from her romantic relationship with the human Jedi Knight Kanan Jarrus. Their offspring looks rather human though, except for the green hair color. Also, the most amount of insane fan art of Star Wars aliens seems to involve always Twi'leks for some reason. If the galaxy had an extra large bug spray, the Geonosians would have been extinct a lot earlier. These insectoid species are winged creatures native to the planet Geonosis, a hot, rocky world with occasional spire-like formations and barely any greenery. These spires were the hives of the Geonosians, where they lived in the underground. The Geonosians themselves stand tall and thin, with hard exoskeletons that give them their signature bony and skeletal look. Their mouths are filled with sharp teeth, allowing them to bite through tough material, even clone trooper armor. And with their ability to fly, Geonosians look like locusts who went to the gym and ate a lot of protein. But while they may look like primitive creatures that only fly and fight, Geonosians are actually incredibly intelligent, with a lot of them being responsible for various technological marvels. Their battle droid factories being only one of their many achievements. Another is the initial concepts of the Death Star, which were also made by them. Their hive society is very interesting. Where a caste system determines their roles, the queen stood up top of the hive, giving birth and laying the eggs for every single Geonosian. When a Geonosian is born, they get categorized and get a predetermined job. There were aristocrats, which organized and ruled over the hive and made up only 5% of a hive's population. Then there were the drones, which were in turn categorized into different tasks like warrior, pilot, or worker. Drones were nameless and considered widely replaceable in their society, often being mistreated by the aristocrats. During the Clone Wars, Archduke Poggle the Lesser is the highest aristocrat of the biggest Geonosian hive. Despite their hive-minded culture, Geonosian drones weren't just mindless creatures and could rise in the ranks should they perform well in the combat arena, and did also possess individuality. However, their queen always had the ability to overrule their individuality. She also had these brain worms that could control people and Geonosians alike. These worms could even bring dead Geonosians back to life, controlling their bodies and treating them like a galactic version of the Walking Dead. Sadly, most Geonosians were killed by the Empire, and Darth Vader himself killed their last queen. Thus, they're most likely extinct by the time of the Galactic Civil War. The Hutt species are giant space slugs with small eyes and arms, wide mouths, and thick bodies. Being without legs, the only way they could move was by using their powerful tails, but in most cases, they have people to carry them around on carriages wherever they go. Hutts are, of course, most widely known as gangsters in the galaxy. They're space mafias who control big sectors of the galaxy's underworld, including several systems and hyperspace lanes in the Outer Rim areas. Most of them come from the planet Nalhutta, a swampy and polluted world that matches the equally nasty looks of the Hutt species. But despite being slimy and kinda disgusting looking, Hutts were incredibly intelligent and influential, with a vast amount of resources at their disposal. In fact, they were so influential that they were often considered untouchable by the Republic and the Empire, and had to be considered their own ruling entity. Hutt culture is characterized by excess. They want everything in excess, whether it's power or money. That's why, even though the Hutts form a mafia-like group in the underworld, they're often rivals of one another in an effort to take more control and power. And most Hutts hold on to their power and territories for a long time, because they can live for centuries, sometimes even over 1,000 years. What most people don't know about Hutts is that they are hermaphrodites. That means they're neither male nor female because they possess both reproductive organs, but usually pick a gender to stick to. This allowed them to reproduce without a partner, giving birth to tiny slug-like babies like Rada. Also, they spoke their own tongue called Huttese mostly, but were also capable to speak in basic galactic standard as seen with Zero the Hutt. But most Hutts didn't feel the need to adapt their tongue to others and rather have the others adapt to them. Despite their shrewd nature and love of excess, Hutts were rarely violent themselves. They were actually rather calm when negotiating with people, having the violent actions be carried out by their subordinates. But most of them were ruthless and usually quite wealthy, thus they did like to see violence for their own entertainment. A lot of Hutts held rancors, which they saw as a status symbol to own such a dangerous pet, but also as a way to dispose of enemies in the most violent yet entertaining way possible. There's no doubt that the most prominent Hutt is Jabba the Hutt, a gangster who controlled Mos Eisley and much of Tatooine. And then there's Gardulla the Elder, the Hutt who once owned Shmi Skywalker, Anakin's mother. And finally, there's also Jabba the Human? Wait, who is that? Most people think the Hutts are the only crime lords and gangsters in the galaxy, but they're rivaled in power by the Pykes, a humanoid species native to the planet Obadiah. This world is known for its rocky terrain and the Pykes' deep involvement in the galactic spice trade. Obadiah was a drug hub of the galaxy due to their mind-altering spice, which millions in the galaxy were addicted to. Controlling that network was the Pike Syndicate, a massive network of Pikes having an iron grip on that business. Through this monopoly, they were able to amass wealth and a network of criminals and mercenaries in the underworld. On top of that, Pikes were experts at logistics, bribery, smuggling, and all the charming activities that make the galaxy's underworld as interesting as it is. The Pykes had thin, elongated bodies. They came with large, wedge-shaped heads and small eyes. In most cases, they wore breathing masks to protect themselves against the different planetary environments they traveled to. Underneath the masks, their faces look almost skeletal, with narrow mouths and sharp features that make them look like they were carved in granite. In terms of their culture, they tend to be secretive but very organized. Imagine a cult that's mixed with a corporation. That's basically what the entire Pike culture is all about. Their society revolves around their loyalty to the Syndicate, which behaves like a shadow government that operates purely to get to its illegal profits. The most prominent member of the Pike Syndicate during the Clone Wars was Lam Pike, who served as their leader. He also joined Darth Maul's infamous Shadow Collective. They worked alongside the Mandalorians and other crime syndicates in that brief partnership to consolidate more underworld power for the former Sith Lord. Tatooine is home to some of the shadiest and nastiest people in the galaxy. Amongst them are the native Sand People, or Tusken Raiders. They're widely known to be highly aggressive and territorial people, savages by the local population on Tatooine. The Tusken Raiders themselves were humanoids that are recognizable by their head-to-toe wrappings that protect them from the twin suns and sandstorms of Tatooine. They rarely show their faces, which were hidden behind masks that come with eye goggles and breathing filters, but they were in fact not humans. Being the first settlers on Tatooine, the Tusken were always nomadic people. They move from one area to another depending on where they can find the right resources. Tatooine's harsh wasteland forced the Sand People to develop different survival instincts, like tracking and hunting. Furthermore, they could survive on minimal water and managed to tame and ride the native banthas for transportation. They also discovered that you could drink water from the black melons that were buried underneath the sand, thus managing to survive without the use of moisture vaporators. Now, coming back to the other inhabitants regarding them as savage brutes that were primitive and knew nothing more than ambushing anyone near their camp. The truth is that Tuskens also merely tried to survive. After all, they were the original inhabitants of Tatooine before others started conquering their lands and building cities and settlements in their dunes. As they retributed, they got caught up in an endless cycle of fights where the settlers and the Tuskens kept on fighting each other, leaving a sour taste between them. But there were individuals that actually got along just fine with the Tuskens. Tusken Raider society is tribal and deeply rooted in tradition. They have a strict code of behavior and a strong connection to their banthas. In fact, they form lifelong bonds with their banthas. That's why they also won't hesitate to fight anyone looking to steal their beloved animals. Their rituals are passed down orally, and their language consists of grunts and howls that are unintelligible to most outsiders. They're also known to perform rites of passage, and any violation of their customs was sure to be met with retribution. Their gaffy sticks also had a symbolic meaning for them as well, with each of them possessing their own unique weapon which they acquire and build in an initiation ritual. They'd use these sticks as melee weapons to crush people's skulls or in a more wholesome manner, to brush the bantha's teeth. Tusken also often carried what was called a cycler rifle, which shot a solid physical projectile instead of a blaster shot, which could penetrate shields in the 2015 DICE Battlefront. In the deeper Star Wars lore, one of the more prominent Tusken Raiders is Sharad Het. He was a Jedi Knight who adopted the Tusken Raider society as a human. Even though he was a human, Het still wore Tusken garb to pay homage to their heritage. Boba Fett in the Disney canon also became an honorary Tusken Raider after living among them and learning their culture. He got his personal gaffy stick out of it. Rarely seen without their signature brown robes, the Jawas are a small-figured species native to the desert planet Tatooine. The Jawas are known across the galaxy for their tinkering skills, making them some of the best scavengers around. No one really knows what a Jawa looks like, but they're often seen wearing brown robes from top to bottom, with only glowing yellow eyes peeking out from under the hood. There are various theories about their real appearance. These range from lizard-like creatures to rodents. Only thing we know for a fact is that they're hairy and furry. But while their appearance may be a mystery, what's not a mystery is their talent for scavenging. Jawas love going from one junk scrap to another to look for broken droids, rusted starship parts, or anything that looks like it could be worth a few credits. If someone needed spare parts, there's a good chance a group of Jawa may have in their massive vehicles called sandcrawlers, which are essentially moving junkyards. Shout out to the UCS Lego Sandcrawler at this point. What a beauty! The Jawas are also known for their language called Jawa'ese, which sounds like gibberish, but it's a language that's composed of squeaks, smells, and short barks. Utini being one that is frequently heard, which means as much as wow or hey. Jawas are also believed to be related to the Tusken Raiders, but they absolutely hated each other, as the Jawas often invade Tusken territory when rolling around the desert with their sandcrawlers. Interestingly, Jawas have a great sense of smell, a trait they use for identifying each other under their almost identical robes. Unlike most alien species in the galaxy, there aren't a lot of named Jawas. One famous member is Achiel, though, who was actually a Jedi member during the Clone Wars and even spoke perfect Galactic Standard Basic. The Chiss were a humanoid species with blue skin and red eyes. They came from Casilla, one of the many planets in the unknown regions of the galaxy, largely untouched by the Republic or the Empire. This is a cold and isolated planet and was thus perfect for the isolationist society of the Chiss. They were originally humans who ventured deep into space and had to settle on Xilla. Through thousands of generations of adaptive evolution, the Chiss came about as a result of humans needing to be resilient enough to survive this planet, adapting blue skins and red eyes. The Chiss society is built up in a hierarchical structure. They're ruled by the Chiss Ascendancy, which is made up of 4 noble families known as ruling houses. Although these families weren't referring to biological families, but rather the Chiss's place in the society. Each newborn Chiss would then be affiliated into one of these 4 ruling houses, which should determine his role when growing up. However, this wasn't as much of a determining factor as it sounds like, as any Chiss was still allowed to change his position, no matter which house he belonged to. They spoke their own language called Chun, which other species in the galaxy struggled to pronounce correctly, and most couldn't understand it either. The most famous Chiss by far is Grand Admiral Thrawn. Born as Mithron Ruodo, which is his name in the Chiss tongue, he's a military genius who ascended through the ranks of the Chiss because of his exceptional mind. He's one of the very few Chiss to ever leave the Ascendancy and allied himself with the Empire as he saw it necessary to have a strong empire to fend off the greater threats to the galaxy, that would be the Vujon Vong. He quickly rose through the ranks, becoming Grand Admiral, and was then sent on a mission to investigate the unknown regions in the EU, or was banished by Ezra in the Disney canon, making him miss the events of the original trilogy. In both continuities, he returns after the fall of the Empire and attempts to rebuild it as the cunning and brilliant war tactician that he is. For the longest time, due to Thrawn, most people thought that all Chiss would be similar in demeanor and thinking to him. However, Thrawn turned out to be an exceptional being, even amongst the Chiss, and most of them had very individual personalities. Whether or not hell exists in the galaxy far, far away is still unknown. But if it doesn't, then Zabraks are probably the closest depiction the galaxy has to demons. They were humanoids with horned heads and tattooed faces. Zabraks mainly come from the world of Iridonia, although some of them did also have colonies on other worlds, like the one on Dathomir. Still, Iridonia remains the heart of their civilization and culture. Because Iridonia is no vacation spot for an intergalactic tourist, Zabraks are known for being very resilient and unusually hardy. They can withstand tough, dry desert environments of Iridonia, and also had to deal with the carnivorous Anubas that were native to their planet. Their natural resistance to pain is one of the things that makes them special, allowing them to live in tough places through sheer grit and willpower. They also possessed a second heart, allowing them to have some more stamina than the average human when under stress. In terms of their culture, Zabraks take pride in being independent and strong-willed. They don't like taking orders from anybody, which makes them fierce warriors. Their society also values personal strength, honor, and mental discipline. That's why plenty of Zabraks in the galaxy find employment as bodyguards, mercenaries, or even Jedi. They don't necessarily lean toward good or evil, because they just want to be the best at whatever they choose to do. As far as good guys are concerned, Jedi Masters Eth Koth and Agan Kolar are prominent members of the Zabrak species. However, there are also 2 Zabraks that are far better known. The Sith Lord Darth Maul and his brother Savage Opress are both Dathomirian Zabraks who were bred and raised by Dathomirian witches on Dathomir. Unlike the Zabraks on Iridonia, Dathomirian Zabraks tend to be more aggressive because they were bred to be warriors. What's interesting about the Zabraks is that their face markings are actually tattoos instead of natural patterns they were born with. They tattoo those marks on their faces as they grow up, with each tattoo symbolizing the journey that the individual Zabrak went through. Meanwhile, their horn pattern is unique, similar to how unique all humans' fingerprints are. The best way to get merchandise sales through the roof is by introducing teddy bear-like species. That's what the Ewoks are for. They look like they were built from a stuffed toy factory, looking like bear cubs walking on 2 feet. They're barely a meter tall and have large eyes and round faces that complete the cute look. But these small characters from the forest moon of Endor may look huggable and cuddly, but they were unwitting troublemakers who contributed to the destruction of the second Death Star. Natives to this moon, Ewoks are mostly an unknown species to much of the galaxy. Of course, because they were left unexposed to the mainstream galaxy, they're primitive creatures who rely on the forest for their homes and weapons. That's why they hardly use technology, not even knowing that C-3PO was a droid. But still, they were smart enough to use logs to build huge tree houses and platforms in the treetops. So yeah, despite being more primitive than most species, they actually have brains behind that furry cranium. During the Empire's temporary occupation of Endor, the Ewoks managed to give stormtroopers and Imperial walkers some trouble, because they were more attuned to their land and are incredibly talented at using whatever resources they could find. They're agile climbers, quick on their feet, and small enough to be hard to notice. This makes them great ambush attackers, especially in the dark of night. Just play Ewok Hunt in Battlefront 2 to get a sense of that. Culturally, Ewoks are tribal and deeply connected to nature. They live in tight-knit communities and tree villages and follow a spiritual belief system involving nature spirits and ancestral worship. They respect the forest and its balance, and they communicate using a language called Wookiees, which sounds like a mix of chirps, grunts, and enthusiastic gibberish. They celebrate victories and important events with loud music, dancing, and lots of drumming. Also, yes, they do eat people. Why shouldn't they? They are hunters after all, and cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Other species are just strangers to them, and they'd surely take an easy meal. The most famous Ewok in the galaxy is Wicket W. Warwick, who was the first to meet Princess Leia during the Battle of Endor. As a fun trivia as well, originally Ewoks were never supposed to be introduced, because George Lucas intended to use Wookiees instead. That's why the name Ewok is basically just a reverse of how you pronounce Wookiee. It's quite easy to spot a Duros from a distance. After all, these guys have huge volleyball-shaped heads, large red eyes, and long noseless faces.
I'd be careful where I was sticking my nose if I were you.
How ironic coming from the noseless guy, right? Their skin tone also catches the eye quite easily because it's either turquoise or a duller shade of bluish-green. These humanoid species come from the planet Duros, located in the core world of the galaxy. It was a heavily polluted world that the Duros abandoned, turning it into a ghost town that's mostly home to factories and food processing plants. As a result, these people had to live in different worlds all over the galaxy, earning their keep in different fields. Their species do come with a few advantages, as they tend to have better spatial awareness and reflexes than a regular human. Due to that, they were known to be great pilots. And because of that, many of them try to leave Duros and find an employment as a pilot. It is interesting to note that the Duros and the Neimoidians come from the same evolutionary line. The Duros were the original members of the line until the Neimoidians split off from them ages ago, becoming an entirely new species. The Duros also have a history rooted deep in space exploration. Way back, they were some of the first to develop hyperspace travel and find different lanes that run through Duros. For those members that didn't turn to piloting, some also turned to bounty hunting. Cad Bane was also a Duros and became the most skilled bounty hunter in the galaxy, known for his quick draw of the blaster. Although I do find it quite funny how everyone just kind of stops and accepts the challenge whenever Bane just stands there. Like, why not just shoot him when he's posing? Togruta came from the planet Shili, a world rich in greenery and wildlife. It is on this planet that Togruta form tight-knit communities that allow them to be one with nature. True enough, their skin colors and appearances make it obvious that they are nature-loving people. The Togruta are tall people with striped mantras and head tails called laku, which frame their faces in a way that makes them look like royalty. A Togruta's mantral grows as they age. Meanwhile, their skin comes in different shades, such as orange, red, and blue. They often have white facial markings that give them a tribal look, and while you might think their mantrals are just decorations, these are actually helpful because they allow the Togruta to sense ultrasonic frequencies and make them more attuned to movement around them. This is important because the Togruta are known for living in forests with wild animals that are either being hunted or the ones doing the hunting. That's why a Togruta's natural sonar gives them the edge in hunting and survival. Togruta evolved in the wild grasslands of Shili, where they developed strong group-oriented behavior. They aren't the type to go solo because Togruta value cooperation and unity over individualism, and their culture strongly encourages this pack mentality. They believe that the group survives together or not at all, which is why bravery, teamwork, and loyalty are deeply respected traits. Hunting is not just for food, but also a part of their spiritual life and social bonding. In terms of special skills, the Togruta's mantrals make them uniquely suited to combat and stealth. They're faster and more agile than humans and are quite perceptive, with excellent reflexes that allow them to react quickly to movements. Arguably, the most notable Togruta is Ahsoka Tano, a former Jedi Padawan to Anakin Skywalker before she left the Jedi Order. She's known for her more mystical connection to the Force, similar to how the Togruta Society works. Another notable member was Shakti, who is most notorious for the most amount of different variations of her death that are depicted in Star Wars. Personally, I found the one where she faces Starkiller the most, though her fight with Grievous in the 2003 cartoon is also just awesome. Rodians hailed from the jungle planet Rodia. A hot and swampy world covered in greenery, Rodians are just as green as their homeworld, with a pickled skin. Furthermore, their species came with long tapered snouts, large multifaceted eyes, and fingers that have suction-like tips at the end. They also have bony ridges on their skulls and pointed ears that gave them a buggy yet reptilian look. While they may have googly eyes that aren't that scary, Rodians are actually one of the more aggressive and competitive species in the galaxy. They're best known for their tracking and hunting skills, which resulted in a lot of them becoming bounty hunters. Their keen eyesight and great sense of smell also give them the advantage over other bounty hunters and mercenaries. Rodians were known as big fans of drama. They have a strong theater tradition in their homeworld, allowing them to show off their dramatic skills. This shift in their society was more recent though, as originally, they used hunting as a way to prove themselves to their fellow Rodians. Over time, mainstream culture in Rodia focused more on creative outlets like theater instead of staying true to their hunting tradition. Still, some Rodians stuck to their roots, becoming scum of the galaxy as bounty hunters. The most famous Rodian in the galaxy is, without a doubt, Greedo. That's the very same guy who tried to shoot Han Solo in the Mos Eisley Cantina for owing Jabba the Hutt a huge sum. Also, a last fun fact about Rodians, they're actually quite smelly compared to other species, often smelling like burnt ozone, which isn't the most pleasant scent there is. Also, their language, Rhodese, makes them sound like they're gargling mouthwash. Despite that, most people tend to understand Rhodese. No one knows what they're called or where they're from, but most people refer to them as Yoda's species, named after, of course, Jedi Grandmaster Yoda, the most prominent member of this group. Yoda's species is unique, even when compared to the various species of creatures and sentient beings in the known galaxy. They're small, rarely taller than the average human's knee, but their species is naturally incredibly powerful in the Force, often far stronger than the average Force-sensitive individual. Yoda, for example, had the highest midichlorian count among all Jedi, except for Anakin Skywalker during the last days of the final days of the Republic. Due to their exceptional potential in the Force, there's a theory that the Force itself keeps the location of their homeworld a secret out of fear that they may end up getting exploited by the Sith or ill-willed beings. On top of their small size and giftedness in the Force, Yoda species are long-lived beings that are known to survive for over 900 years. They age differently from most species, with 50-year-old members of their species still looking and acting like toddlers. Looking at you, baby Yoda. Some other known members of Yoda species were Yaddle, the only known female of the species, Master Vandar, who was active during the Jedi Civil War in the Old Republic, and of course, Grogu, Disney's favorite marketing tool. I can't really blame him though. Grogu does look friggin' adorable. His role also single-handedly made The Mandalorian show as intriguing as it is for me in the first 2 seasons. Thus, he's definitely a big W for me. The Kaminoans themselves were a tall, mysterious alien species living on a rainy planet that's mostly covered by an ocean. They're very slender, with necks so long they could probably see over your roof. Their skin is smooth and pale, close to the shade of white or gray with deep black eyes. Their head literally reminds me of the alien emoji. But while Kaminoans look like a cross between a classic alien and a giraffe, they were the leaders in genetic science. They lived on Kamino, which was once an unknown planet to much of the galaxy before the Clone Wars. But thanks to the secret efforts of the Sith Lords Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious, Kamino became one of the most important planets during the final days of the Galactic Republic. Only a few people know about their existence because they live outside the usual borders of the known galaxy in wild space, and don't usually venture off-world. The few who did know about them knew that they were expert cloners, capable of genetically engineering any being. Their expertise in cloning was at such a level that no one in the galaxy could easily replicate their work, even during the time of the Empire. Using their cloning tech, the Kaminoans created an army of millions of clone troopers, all engineered from Jango Fett's genes. They were battle-ready in a matter of years because of their rapid maturity and fast-paced training. These clones were also receptive to orders and were programmed to follow their superiors by the Kaminoans, even if it meant gunning down more than a few younglings during Order 66. As intelligent as Kaminoans may have been, they were said to be lacking in the empathy department. Their society was built on perfectionism, and they treated everything in that manner, be it themselves or the beings they created. If a Kaminoan citizen would go crazy, they'd see her as defective and terminate them to keep the high standard of their society up. This was reflected in their speech pattern, which was slow and void of emotions. Thus, they also treated their clones as products instead of living people, freeing themselves from any emotional attachments. But despite this cold and emotionally distant demeanor, Kaminoans are the literal calm in the storms, never seeming agitated and always remaining their polite and somewhat distant demeanor. Some of the most well-known Kaminoans include Lama Su, the Prime Minister of Kamino during the Clone Wars, as well as Nala Se, the chief scientist on Kamino who was responsible for most of the Jango Fett clones. Sadly, shortly after the rise of the Empire, Tipoca City, Kamino's main cloning center and science hub, was destroyed by the Empire in a bombardment, basically erasing most of the Kaminoans' cloning technology. They are often mistaken for Kaminoans, but Quirmians are an entirely different species of aliens. These people are